Interesting to note that none of the kiosks I tested against actually detect that dialog box again. So I have, or ICAT contains all these different document files that have a patched version of cmd.exe, which does not validate the disable cmd registry key. So if the kiosk disables cmd, essentially you get an Office document, you click the link, shell pops up, you win. Okay, ICAT and Java applets. Now, a signed Java applet can actually execute a local process. Now, we can detect if the JRE is installed by using the ICAT reconnaissance technique, which I first talked about. And if it is, well, we can get a Java app to spawn. Now, does the kiosk detect the Java security warning prompt? As you can imagine, no. None of the kiosks I tested actually detected the prompt saying warning security, which I thought would be pretty fucking obvious, right? I mean, this glaring attack vector. So you get this prompt pops up. It says, are you sure you want to run this? You click run, you get a command shell. You win. Now, ICAT contains signed kiosk-specific Java applets. I got apps to spawn all different types of executables. And I also have a copy of Jython, which is GNU Citizen's Python inside a Java applet. So essentially what you can do is spawn a Java applet which has an inline Python interpreter inside it and start executing native Python code on the kiosk. And then, well, you really win then. I mean, you have Python. Okay, ActiveX. Now, safe for scripting ActiveXs can be used to compromise a kiosk. We can have an unsafe method inside an object, such as object.execute cmd.exe. So the trick becomes, can we install a malicious ActiveX on the kiosk? So what I did was I wrote, the ICAT ActiveX. So it's a safer scripting ActiveX which executes arbitrary executables. I wouldn't recommend you install this on your home computer. It's not secure. It's purposely not secure. But if you walk up to a kiosk and you have administrative authority and you have the ability to install an ActiveX, you install my ActiveX and then use it to spawn a command prompt. Really easy. Now, currently you do require administrative authority. That's kind of the catch. Now, IE8 is changing things a little bit in the fact that you won't require administrative authority under IE8 to spawn or to install a new ActiveX. Users will be able to install an ActiveX. So potentially this will be more of a valuable attack vector in the future. Now, ICAT and Click Once. Click Once is .NET 2.0 plus technology. It's essentially Microsoft's online application deployment. It's kind of like the evolution of ActiveX, or ActiveX meets .NET. Essentially, what it means is that an unsigned Click Once application will execute on your system with full trust and can spawn arbitrary processes. Well, that sounds like really cool functionality. I like that. So users are warned. There is a dialog box that pops up. Application runs security warning. This publisher cannot be verified. Are you sure you want to run this application? As you can imagine, 0% of the kiosks I tested actually managed to detect this dialog box either. Now, this does require that the kiosk has the .NET CLR installed. Now, this sort of is a bit of a problem for older kiosks, but not for newer kiosks. I found that 4 out of my 10 tested kiosks were actually written in .NET. So they had .NET CLR 2 present. So you could click a link, and the Click Once apps would just start running. Now, I was so impressed by the power I had with Click Once and really the ability I had to own kiosks really, really fast. I said, well, I'm going to need to write some really cool Click Once tools. So I wrote 3 pretty nifty little Click Once.NET apps. The first I wrote was an embedded web browser. So using the same idea as the Microsoft Media Player trick of having a web browser inside a third-party application, we can spawn a web browser inside a Click Once application. We then get a virgin web browser that we can then escape out of. I have a Click Once app called the Application Executor, which will just spawn arbitrary executables. It'll spawn CMD, command.com, Explorer, spawn whatever you want, give you shell. And I also have an access token pincher. So access token hijacking is a pretty hip subject these days. This is essentially where you can have a network service user that is, in theory, lower privilege, which has access to the SE impersonate privilege on the local system and is capable of impersonating a system privileged token. What this really boils down to is that as a network service user, I can impersonate system and spawn a command shell. So I wrote this little tool called Access Token Pincher, and you basically click a button and you get a system shell, which is win, right? You got system. You got more fucking privilege than the kiosk. Okay, so who here has ever crashed a web browser? Show of hands. Oh, 3 people. Ooh. kind of web browsers do you guys use? So I call this attack emo kiosking. Essentially, the goal is to create an unhandled exception in a kiosk browser. Now, if the kiosk browser crashes, it freaks out, it crashes, and then you get the desktop. Well, you win. This is a pretty rare situation. This is a situation where denial of service vulnerability becomes a highly critical attack vector. So ICAT contains common browser crash techniques. There's the published exploits which result in a crash. Memory exhaustion, I've got a couple of integer overflows, different tricks and techniques. These are fairly reliable, 40 to 50% chance of testing kiosk crash or reboot. I thought, yeah, 40 to 50% is pretty good, but I want 100%. I want something which will reliably crash pretty much any browser in the world. So I started researching on Flash. Of course, Flash being the most popular plugin, well, in the world. Everyone here has Flash installed, right? Yeah. Okay. So my goal and my thinking was, can I create a Flash file that will reliably crash a browser? So I performed sequential byte file format fuzzing of the SWF file format. Essentially what I did was I took a valid SWF file and I sequentially replaced each byte with different fuzz data, and then I tried to render that file inside a browser to see if I could create an exception. Turns out, yes, I can. I found multiple files that created unhandled exceptions within the Flash player and would reliably crash Flash on OS X, Linux, Windows, AIX, Solaris, pretty much any platform, anything to be honest, and pretty much any version of Flash. The exact vulnerability of the exact attack was an integer divided by 0 vulnerability. So I mean, this isn't really exploitable to get code execution, but this is exploitable in our situation where we can make something crash. So I created what I call the ICAT Auto Magic Flash Crasher. If the Flash plugin is installed, ICAT will crash it. It works. It's guaranteed, ODay magic. Now, Adobe have technically resolved this vulnerability in Flash Player 10RC. I guess when that finally becomes final in, I don't know, 6 to 9 months, this bug will no longer work. However, a lot of kiosks, well, they don't really get patched very often, and people always run an older version. So this turned out to be a very valuable, a very effective attack vector. So let's assume something worked. Let's assume you have access to the kiosk file system. You got a command shell to spawn, you got a common dialog Java installed. Something worked, something spawned. You went, wow, I've got a command prompt. What now? What's your next logical step? You're sitting at the kiosk, wow, I've got a command prompt. Whoa. So the next thing you really need to do is download additional tools and binaries onto it. If you want to be malicious, you want to get your keylogger on there. Maybe you want to get Metasploit on there. Maybe you want to get some local privilege escalation. You want to try and get the system. You want to try and further own the kiosk, maybe further own the network. But you run into a bit of a problem here. How do you download tools in a toolless environment? So the kiosk terminal will not have a copy of wget.exe present. They're not going to give you native tools that you can use to download other tools. Internet Explorer is likely going to be uninstalled or disabled. And file downloads will definitely be disabled. So how do you download files in Windows? This is a pretty old school problem. So first thing I found was that you can actually download a file using a common dialog. I didn't know you could do this. This is kind of funky Windows functionality. So if you get a choose file or a file browse, file view controlling, file open dialog to pop up, you can attach a remote file. So you can attach a file from http:// whatever, and Windows will use WebDAV or FPSC and download that file, save it locally, and then allow you to attach it. So you can see in the first screenshot there, I've attached cmd.exe, and you see in the little screenshot at the bottom, the directory of c:documents and settings, kiosk user, local settings, temporary internet files, content.ie5, and content value. I have cmd square brackets 1 bracket. So it downloaded the file for me because it expected me to attach it from a remote resource. That's pretty handy. So it downloads, Windows will download content for you. We can also use Flash to download files. Who would have thought? So as I said previously, most kiosks disable file downloads within the browser security policy. This is pretty much the first thing any kiosk vendor does. And they say, well, we're going to go into IE security settings here, and we go file download disable. Whoa, now we're secure. And when you try and download a file, Windows pops up a little box saying, well, your current security settings do not allow this file to be downloaded. However, if you use Flash and you use the file reference object, and you say, Flash, download this file for me, it will. It doesn't validate or cross-reference with the browser security policy at all. So if you have Flash installed, you can basically bypass that element of the browser security policy which lets you download arbitrary files. That's a pretty cool trick. This has a very, very high success rate against kiosks. Actually, this works on any kiosk that disables file downloads, which is pretty powerful. This is also another unpublished trick. Yeah, it's a cool trick. Very, very cool trick. You can also use Notepad to download and upload files. So same trick as the common dialog attaching a file. You go File, Open in Notepad, and you open a 7-bit safe text file from a remote website. Notepad will download that file and show it to you. I thought, wow, that's kind of handy. That's kind of cool trick. But what about uploading content? Let's say you break into a kiosk and you're browsing around and you find creditcards.txt or creditcards.log or money transaction or something juicy. And you're like, ooh, is this really big log file? I want this back at my home server. You go File, Save, and you save it to your remote website. And Windows will use FPSE and WebDAV and try and upload that file to a remote resource. So you can upload and download content using Notepad. Who would have thought? So the number one problem with kiosk hacking is you're in a toolless environment. So I said, man, I need to provide lots and lots of tools for kiosk hackers. So I provided a bunch of assorted kiosk hacking tools. I have patched copies of cmd.exe, which won't validate or check the disable cmd reg key, which allows you to run it if cmd.exe has been disabled. I got tools that will enable the start bar if it's been hidden. I got tools that will spawn different applications and different things on the kiosk for you. I have a group policy bypass technique, which uses Mark Russianovich's DLL injection, which gets past group policy for disabling CMD. And I have a little harmless pop-up that pops up saying, uh-oh, someone hacked this kiosk, just in case you want to leave a marker or a bit of a tag. All the tools are available as .exe.zip using the flash download trick, which will bypass, of course, download restrictions, and also 7-bit safe VB script. So you can download all the tools using Notepad. I then execute the VB script. And what I do is I use VB script and the FSO, the file system object, to recreate original binary contents on disk. I then execute it. Essentially, it's a VB script that pops shell. So command shell detours. When I started trying to pop a command shell, I realized that most kiosks are actually set up in a way that they don't allow you access to cmd.exe or maybe command.com. They've blocked access to this. So I thought to myself, how many ways are there to spawn a command shell on Windows? I was able to actually come up with 17 different methods. So you can use loadfix.com space start.exe will spawn a command shell. You can create a service, then call the service. You can create a timer, then have a service be installed after 1 minute and then execute. You can do start loadfix.com cmd.exe. You can just type %conspec%. So there's heaps and heaps of different methods of popping a command shell. So I try to integrate into all my tools this sort of approach of trying every single method. It won't just try and pop cmd.exe. It'll try every single method of spawning command shells. As you'll see in my demo, this usually results in not one command shell popping, but 50, which is really good. And this is also flawless at bypassing kiosk ACL. So any kiosk that I tested that has some of these native ACL protections that stop you from launching cmd.exe, yeah, this will nicely get around it. Okay, so I officially released ICAT at DEF CON 16, about 2 months ago in Las Vegas. Now, funny story, when I arrived in the Las Vegas airport, I saw a kiosk terminal. I was like, ooh, they use kiosks here. Oh, this is pretty cool. And I noticed that the kiosk product was actually one of the 10 that I had initially targeted my ICAT tool against. I was thinking, oh, that's going to be really effective. I'm going to be able to hack that very fast. Well, it turns out I could hack it in about 10 seconds. So I made the mistake during my talk at DEF CON in mentioning this. And I told the DEF CON audience, I can own any kiosk here in Vegas in 10 seconds. Well, it turns out Riviera, the Bellagio, Sahara, Caesars, everyone uses these kiosks. These kiosks were the most popular deployed kiosks in Las Vegas. So the kiosk in the Riviera is the one at the top that has the little command shell popped up. Someone hacked that about 10 seconds after my talk. And then the IT guys came down and they fixed it. And someone went back and they hacked it again. And this cat and mouse game repeated for about, I don't know, a few hours. I left the hotel as fast as possible. I was like, fuck this, I don't want to be around here. And then the cops were called. And the cops arrived. And what the cops were doing was they were standing around the kiosk and stopping people from using their cell phones. Because what people were doing was they were hacking it and then taking a photo. A cop's like, oh, you're hacking it with your cell phone. So, yeah,